Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. From group 3, topics ICT and before we start our presentation, group 3 consists of all. First, we have Erika Putra as the first president. Second one, myself, Modon Praldi, as moderator. And so the third presentation, and the last we have Tamara Mulishita as the second presenter. Now we go to the first material will be presented by Eric and is yours.
Sorry, moderator. The first material will be Tamara.
Oh yeah, so Tamara, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Now let's begin with this material. ICT in the causes of language variation and change. Causes of language change can be divided into two broad categories. The first one, language external factors as geography, contact with new versus old phenomena, imperfect learning, a substratum effect, and social prestige factors. The second, internal factors comprise ease of articulation, analogy, reanalysis, and randomness. The evolution of language is the relevance of ICT to no less than three of the external factors. These are geography, contact with new phenomena, and social prestige. Geography. The importance of geography for language change stems from the fact that distance and topographical features such as the presence of mountains, seas, and plains affect prospect for face-to-face interaction and therefore language contact between speech communities. Hedrick's observation that railroads and electric power reach their optimum efficiencies on a regional scale. Telegraph quickly become national and in the case of submarine cables, intercontinental and even global. I think that's all for me. Back to moderator.
Okay, thank you Tamara for presenting the material. For the next material will be presented by Eric. Time is yours.
All right, thank you, moderator. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Contact with new versus old phenomena. Language changes in response to the evolution of society, adjusting to new events, artifacts, and ideas, and to the declining importance of certain old phenomena. The linguistic consequences of inventions and of the activities they give rise to can be seen mostly in the area of vocabulary. With the coining of new words and with extensions in the meaning of established lexemes, they also take the form of new jargons and varieties. It is well known that progress in medicine, biochemistry, physics, aviation has led to the creation of thousands of new terms and the development of new specialized registers. In addition, because it is used to disseminate information, ICT contributes to the diffusion of linguistic change that reflect social transformations outside its own field. Next slide, please. Okay. Social prestige factors. Social prestige is conferred by factors and through processes that sometimes remain unclear. Typically, linguistic forms employed by the higher classes will enjoy prestige in part by the status of those who use them, and will be actively promoted by those in power. Weigelus, the 17th-century grammarian who set out to define and describe the bone usage, was quite adamant that the best French was not the language of the common people, but the French spoken by the part of the court that followed the usage promoted by esteemed contemporary authors. This is the kind of French that he held up as a model for others to imitate, argues that the prestige that came to be attached to standard English had more to do with the influence of literature than with its association with London as the center of culture and of political and economic power. Hani does not deny that the link with London was instrumental in the rise of Standard English, but claims that the prestige enjoyed by what was to become the standard variety was primarily due to the existence of a revered literature that served as a model and object of study. All over the world, print has affected the fate of languages, helping to preserve and raise the status of some, whereas its essence had the opposite effect. Barron notes that modes of communication which are given publicity or are valued as a source of prestige have the ability to influence the shape of other modalities. Cross-modal influence can be seen at work today in relation to CMC and SMS. Overall, ICT can be said to interact with social prestige in multivarious and complex ways. Both because of its vehicular functions, there is no doubt that the recent increase in the borrowing of English terms by other languages is linked to the prestige of American culture, particularly pop music, a culture that has been brought to the rest of the world by modern media, and because of the prestige of the multi-linguistic forms that they help circulate. The punk rock singers described by Churchill, whose pronunciation combines stereotypically American forms with stereotypically English working-class forms, coupled with a higher than usual number of non-standard grammatical forms like multiple negotiation and third-person singular "don't," constitute one such counter-elite and offer themselves as icons. The intended effect is assertive and aggressive. To transmit this kind of music, ICT makes those forms available to a wider audience, and presumably helps to raise their prestige in certain circles. In a similar way, the airtime allocated to different languages or varieties on radio and television tends to both reflect and contribute to their relative social prestige. This is not unlike what occurs with urbanization, where interaction between people from a variety of linguistic backgrounds increase exposure to other linguistic 68 ICT and language learning forms and at the same time promote the leveling of differences. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. ICT and the direction of change, the uneasy coexistence of elites and counter-elites that pull language in opposite direction exemplifies the kind of conflicting pressures that language is constantly under. In supporting adherence to a single norm, elites are trying to contain language, whereas by deviating from the norm, counter-elites bring diversity. In either case, ICT helps the linguistic forms to circulate. Bucklin, in the year 1981 to 172, calls the historical processes of linguistic unification and centralization, such as the impact of social elites, centripetal forces of language. Centripetal forces are forces aimed at creating and defending a common unitary language, always threatened by centrifugal forces that work in the opposite direction. The latter introduce additional challenges and can be a source of confusion, but they give a degree of respectability to deviant language. At an individual level, the tension between divergence and convergence takes the form of a balancing act between originality and intelligibility. As people try to be themselves and find their own voice without compromising communicational efficiency, even on the internet, a prime site of struggle between conformity and unconventionality, it is essential to exercise restraint and avoid too many idiosyncrasies in order to be understood. Someone with limited ability to express themselves is more likely to be concerned with being understood than with appearing original, while unconventionality on the part of others will tend to represent an additional obstacle. At the level of society, centripetal and centrifugal forces come in the form of social, political, economic, and technological structures. In common with many other phenomena, ICT may create tendencies towards unification and towards diversification. By bringing together people from diverse backgrounds, electronic communication expands individual and collective linguistic competence. But inasmuch as people then accommodate to one another, electronic interactions also encourage uniformity of language patterns. This is not unlike what occurs with urbanization, where interactions between people from a variety of linguistic backgrounds increase exposure to other linguistic forms and at the same time promote the leveling of differences. In all cases and contexts, centripetal and centrifugal forces remain subject to the restraining influence of the demand for functional efficiency. Okay, I think that's all from me. Back to the moderator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rika, uh, for the presentation. Until class represented by my next slide. Okay, this is the material. The first one we have ICT involved in language check. ICT and factors involved in language check. There is ample evidence that in language, as in other spheres, is frequently the result of the combination of a number of factors. Although brain is often credited with a strategic role in the field of this language, it wouldn't have had stabilizing influence without the assistance of a specialist of social and political. In general, the degree of interplay between the various dimensions of life argues against a one causal ICT and linguistic evolution. It's possible to evaluate the implication for language various aspects of by historicizing technology. This is what section 6 to do in order to try and get the role of ICT in language change. Of the properties of certain inventions on language will be discussed first. The relation and language change will then be approached using the social metrics a springboard. Okay, material we have a property of ICT and language change. Argued by Ong, the first landmark in the history of ICT is printing. The first port of book but writing. This printing will clearly not have the same impact in the unlikely scenario developed before writing and used only for the reproduction of diagrams. Will be taking a brief look at the effect of writing itself. Effect would have had obviously it would have speak to be stored and played, but this would not mean very much improvement since text could already be heard more than once by asking the source to go through writing and audio recording would have made the acquisition of knowledge a more most enterprise, and this lesson of the dependence on other may have to greater originality of raw and language. Uh, what is about the visual channel that makes such as different? First and foremost, in the environment of the time, the move to the visual created difference in the production of language. It, it permits what can be called leisurely production as opposed to the one to do on the fly. Associate writing on parchment or paper allows them to speak their where speech requires a reasonably quick at least the conventional print and writing have both fixed text in the which they are. Both give this durability by extending the length of time they remain available. Both make the reproduction of easier by allowing faithful copies to be made. But in each case, print scores higher regards to the of the text by lessening the risk of errors or during the duplication process. The last material, we have the social metric. The rate of adoption has been found to be affected by many factors, notably cost, public perception of its inherent and relative changes, and the increasing an innovation of those interpersonal. In addition, there may be a sense of legitimizing, so helping on hindering. In the past, national control over which innovation to diffuse, how to diffuse them, and to diffuse them to the telephone was as a new channel for mean that means to transmit speech on lectures as a forerunner of radio, a new means of discussion way, another one-way system. Uh, it is common to see their remit as including language, lingua, which is for was used to under rate at reduce Western countries in the 16th and 18th centuries saw the publication of various proposals, forms, grammar books, and dictionary, including the or degli accademici della word word of the National Academy of Italy, used as other states, Le delle Academy franchise, and Samuel Johnson Dictionary of Language. Uh, so on in helping to education tool that they use. ICT indirectly affects language learners. That's all for uh, that's all our presentation. We're going to open the Q&A. If you want to ask our message, please put in the text. Thank you.
Erika, sir.
Mariska, sir. Yes, yes, sir. Bella, sir, yang share screen katanya, sir. Bella Ananda. Ananda, Ananda Safa Salsabila.
Okay, sir.
Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 4. We'll present the continued material that has been explained by Group 3 before about ICT and language. First of all, I'll introduce our group members. The first is me, Mariska Pratiwi, as the first speaker, and the second is Ananda Safa Salsabila as the second speaker, and the third is Koirani Agnesia as the third speaker. Well, just start for me. Different. Next slide, please. Ananda. Okay, differential effects. The purpose of this section is to document in greater detail the effect of ICT on language. The section is not intended to provide an exhaustive treatment of the subject but aims to give an indication of the diverse way in which ICT affects language. There are selected have been chosen because they exemplify very varying degrees of susceptibility to the influence of ICT. Lexi- Next slide, please. Lexical and semantic change. One of the areas over which ICT is acknowledged to have some influence in vocabulary, according to ITOS 1999 analysis of the lexical growth, are areas in succeeding decades of the 20th century show that radio and film, along with cars and aircraft, dominated lexical innovation in the first half of the century, while computer and computer-related topics were the main source of growth in the second. ICT has been an extremely prolific source of new words or new meanings. The multiplicity of terms and meaning that have sprung up around ICT, as opposed to For example, washing technology is an indication of the significant place ICT has come to assume in daily life, while it is the norm of invention to bring new words or new uses of old words. Some inventions have more influence on language than others, not because they are intrinsically more important, but because they have a greater impact on the culture of the community into which they are introduced. The impact of ICT on vocabulary. Each technological innovation has been accompanied by lexical developments. According to Crystal, as a result of the continuous flow of new words from the field of science and technology since the 17th century, scientific and technical terms now make up over half the vocabulary of English. For example, well-known words television, tape recorder, and computer. New words folder and save. The effect of ICT-related activities on relative frequency. For example, mouse, file, and directory technology intersects with sociopolitical and economic realities to produce instances of language change that reflect and enhance asymmetrical power relationships. Next slide, please. It follows from the above that the role of ICT in the evolution of language varies from case to case, ranging from acting as trigger to catalyst role and disseminating. For another case, the possible roles of ICT are not discrete but merge into one another as ICT precipitates change and then spreads. Furthermore, the role of ICT as disseminating device is not confined to linguistic forms. ICT also disseminates ideas about language. Linguistic topics are popular, and the press and radio frequently carry debates or contributions from members of the public on linguistics matters. I think that's all from me. The next material will be presented by Ananda Safa. For Ananda Safa, the times is yours.
Sorry, sir, may I change the how to share the screen?
Tes.
it used to be, but still visible. If this could happen on face daily exposure to different accents in the context of face-to-face interactions, it is unrealistic to expect pronunciation to be heard on radio or television to erase local practice across the country. And the next metric is spelling and punctuation. Spelling and punctuation are considered as the areas in which standardization is easiest to achieve. Orthographic standardization is a gradual process on which ICT has tended to have a beneficial effect. For example, in Britain, stabilization initially suffered a setback after the introduction of printing. And the next material is the history of stabilization. The first one is broke down by the Norman conquest. The second one is in the 14th century, stabilization was resumed. Third, early in the 15th century, the country once more began to have recourse to English, providing a lead for other professional scribes. Fourth, the problem gradually improved, and by 1700, the stabilization was complete. And the next material is the benefits of ICT in language. The first one is ICT give rise to the formation of new words or extensions in meaning of part of the existing stock. Second, ICT helps disseminate new and unfamiliar forms and meanings beyond their original context, including items borrowed from other languages. And ICT and spelling and punctuation have a stronger link than ICT and pronunciation. Thank you. Back to moderator.
Well, next material will be present by Hoirani. For Hoirani, the times is yours. Hoirani, you may start.
Can I? Register is variety according to as of a opposite user, namely functional variation. As Halliday, 1989, pointed out, functional variation has always existed and unwritten language has been shown to vary in the register. Bieber, 1995, hypothesis 3 separate steps in the evolution of written registers. The first is genesis, the second is early development, and the third split between populous spatial register. In the stage 1, written register enter a language already quite different from typical spoken register, reflection their different primary purpose and production circumstances. The second, early development, considered to have taken 100 until 200 years in the case of English. All written register and to become even more sharply distinguished from some register in ways that extends the range of register variation. And the third, see the development of two sharply distinct trends. Stage 3 is characterized by the development of sharply distinct trends. Some registers become more popular in purpose, responding to the needs of the widening public for accessible reading material. The register refers their early course toward more literary style, developing more characterization. Another register become more specially in purpose, respond to the development of academic, scientific, and institutional field, and the association need to current research finding in this area. And the next material is language spread. Language spread is, according to Cooper, an increase over time in the proportion of communication network that adopt a given language of or language varying for a given communicative function. It is generally taken for granted of language as a concomitant of culture can spread. Um, uh, some of the which I see alter the world language landscape the its effect of the makeup of individual language. Uh, third posed by the ubiquity of a language like English to be like this. English in a international language, and so this has been rooted language for a time as the language of the internet, although English remains the medium. The presence of other language increases, and internet is become more linguistic. Fennell in Fennell claims that if English is seen a murderous language, communication technology must be interpreted as one of its main weapons. The number of English speakers is growing rapidly day by day, and that is a challenge for local language. English is also has language on the internet and high tech, and that is sure to have a negative impact of other. Some claims the diversity of what language is increases due to the dominance of English, and that more local languages are discouraged every. In particular, indigenous language should be empowered. The public, campaigns, and communities encouraged to value their mother tongue alongside English. And the last, media to be harnessed a part of a well-do-out English mainstream program and help shape minority language. This in many situations of language the language minority community has been able to produce media in their own language, helping to alter the socio-linguistic order in several ways. As we have already noted, in general, the fact that a language minority has media in an indicator of its vitality, although that is not necessarily guaranteed for longevity. Comart shows assumption about how to media help minority language. Media gives status. They can link and unify diverse segments of the language community. They can provide a context for economic development and each other. Um, import, important of an indicator as intergeneration transmission or community use, it is undeniable that the field of mediate communication in nowadays a key elements for the production and reproduction of minority language. The first is the electronic media can have an important symbol role for language community. The second, the media can provide a real economic boost, including interactive career prospect for young people who want to work in the minority language. The third, the media are often in developing a public sphere with a language community. The last, the media are also important in relation to how the community is represent both within itself and to outside there. The next slide, please. The last is conclusion. The in the chapter has so far been on language rather than language user and learners. It is time now to consider the implication of the phenomena discussed above for L2 user and language learners. As such, new media can be regarded as inherently intelligible. It can be seen from the description before that ICT has been instrumental in various ways in the development of new expression. Extension phase language user with a hard and complex in terms of the sheer volume of form computing for attention and the difficulty of matching them with appropriate context. This is particularly challenging for L2 user and language learners who find themselves at a disadvantage compared to a monolingual speaker because of the limited exposure they get to L2. Clearly, the significance of change will be vary with that of the area affection. I think that's all. Thank you. Back to the moderator.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all from our group. If you have a question, you can write it on chat box. Thank you.